Hello everyone, I'm Wave, and today I wanted to talk about a visual novel that I just finished reading recently, being Infinite Stratos 2, Love and Purge, which is the sequel to a different game that I've already reviewed on the channel before, being Ignition Hearts. I wanted to discuss all of the various different changes that are made to the sequel to mix things up and make it to where it's going to feel like a very fresh and enjoyable experience to fans of Infinite Stratos, and why, if you already played the original, that I do think sinking your teeth into even more content is worth your while. So let's get into it. So first off, same as Ignition Hearts, Love and Purge is a console exclusive title, so it is only available on PlayStation 3 and PS Vita. I do think it is something worth addressing because a lot of the time maybe you hear console exclusive visual novel and you'd think that maybe it's kind of like a lesser experience because of the fact that it was made exclusively for consoles, and also because it's a licensed anime game, to where you'd think that maybe it's just like a sort of cash grabby kind of thing. And I do think obviously that there is a reason for that kind of stigma, but I do think in both Ignition Hearts and in this game, Infinite Stratos Love and Purge, I'm very glad to say that in general it is a more long formy kind of visual novel. Part of that is because of the fact that I was reading it a lot slower than most other people, probably because I cannot read Japanese, so I had to read it with OCR reader in order to translate that text. But despite that, and me spending around 36 hours, I want to say, on the game, I probably could have shaved a good number of hours off from that. But even so, if it's maybe somewhere between, let's say 25 to 30 hours, if you're somebody that knows how to read Japanese, I still think that's a solid amount of time investment that can actually go into the game. And it's something that I think is pretty notable and is something worth discussing. Now with the first title, Ignition Hearts, it was set within the typical everyday world of Infinite Stratos within the school. Love and Purge diverges from that and kind of mixes things up to where it is based around the OVA episode of the season 2 anime of Infinite Stratos, involving a digital world known as World Purge. And within this digital world, all the heroines are trapped within it, and you as the player character have to dive into this digital world in order to save each and every single girl. And each and every single girl is locked behind a storybook or fairy tale. So there is Cinderella, Rapunzel, Little Mermaid, Snow White, The Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland, and Princess Kaguya, which is more so of a Japanese cultural fairy tale / storybook. But across those 7 routes, all of them kind of follow the same structure. You do a couple different scenarios where you're allowed to choose which location you go to kind of get more information about the world that you are now put into before bumping into the heroine and trying to build up your relationship with them in order to get them to recover their memories and remember that they are not the princess or heroine of that fairy tale. Comparing to the first title, Ignition Hearts, that game had a gameplay mechanic known as the ignition gauge. I feel was implemented quite well, despite the fact that you could save scum around it. It was built around the fact of having how would you implement harem into a visual novel. It was a system to where every decision that the main character makes would boost positively a emotional meter for every single heroine, but then also, depending on which choice, could also anger other heroines. And it was this kind of balancing act that I felt was pretty well done for how passive of a gameplay mechanic it was. And in Love and Purge, we have a different gameplay mechanic known as Brave Heart points, or the Braveheart meter. I don't know, whatever you would want to call it. And that is centered around the thought of there is no longer any negative gains. How it works is that there is significantly more choices throughout all of Love and Purge, and you are rewarded for making more masculine or very forward dialogue choices instead of being more passive, if that makes sense. It's something to where throughout multiple points in the game, as well as the trailer for the game itself, is built around the thought of completing all 7 routes with a true ending that you will then unlock the harem route. And by getting 80% or more on the Braveheart meter, you are actively encouraged to not be as passive with the decision making. Similarly to Ignition Hearts, you can save scum, but I also think that this game almost doesn't really use its gameplay mechanic to its fullest because of how easy it is to actually build the Braveheart meter. On top of the various dialogue choices, there is a mini game that is played 4 times for every single heroine route, to where you are allowed to like massage the heroine. You have an option to talk to them and they will tell you where exactly on their body they want to be massaged. And by choosing the various like hand gestures, you're able to satisfy those conditions and be able to get through a couple different rounds within the massage, and then by doing that you get a large amount of Braveheart points. And I think just over the course of any designated route, it is very simple to be like well past the 100% point. And even if you are at 100% gauge, you can say a negative dialogue response and the gauge won't even go down, because I think there is like a level of percentage that is past what the gauge shows, so you can technically be maybe like 120% like happiness meter when it comes to the Braveheart points, and you're not going to really have any sort of repercussions based off of like how you're answering throughout your game time. Dialing it back onto that thought of a quote-unquote harem route, so there is 8 total routes in the game, 7 of those routes being around each and every single heroine. You can choose at any point upon starting the game, but after getting through all 7 of those routes and meeting the true ending requirement, you are allowed to unlock the harem route. And it's kind of weird talking about it because within both the trailer and then like also in multiple points in the game, from when you boot up the game and view the tutorial on how the Braveheart points system like works, as well as every time you complete a route, you'll get this little dialogue box that pops up once you're booted back to the title screen, letting you know you've cleared this route, complete all the routes in order to unlock the harem route. So throughout your entire playtime of Love and Purge, the game is telling you this is going to be like the ultimate experience that you need to work up to. And I feel like once you get to the harem route, I did enjoy it once I got to a certain portion of it, but the beginning of it is kind of dull and is almost like a little bit of a disappointment. It reuses assets from one of the like the fairy tale worlds from those 7 routes that you begin with, to where, I don't know, the harem route is fundamentally a like weird design choice, because I don't know, it feels like it doesn't differentiate itself enough from every single other like fairy tale or storybook story within Love and Purge. So it's something that I would say isn't something that you should like particularly be looking forward to, and it's just this kind of like bonus additive thing that you get from, you know, playing more and more story. And I think in a way, Love and Purge is kind of like that way of thinking is pretty good to approach when it comes to Love and Purge, because in my previous video, before when this one's going to be uploaded, I kind of talked about it briefly, but I almost feel like Infinite Stratos Love and Purge almost embodies this like feeling of being the ultimate fan disc, to where it is something that is like the story of it is very nice. I like that you kind of have this thought process of every single storybook and you're able to go ahead and do The Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland and kind of change things up to where it's not set within the school setting of Infinite Stratos, and it's able to do things that are more like stretching the boundaries of what you would expect from the Infinite Stratos IP, to where everything's very fun. You can have one route where one of the heroines ends up voicing like half of the characters throughout that entire route because they're all the same person. Another route you might do something else, and I feel like it's pretty cool just being able to kind of experience it that way. I feel like it is something to where it's very enjoyable reading through Love and Purge. And while I will say that I did kind of get a little bit like fatigued towards the end of my playthrough of Love and Purge, overall I ended up really enjoying it, and was able to kind of like feel like it was the ultimate fan disc in a way, because despite it not actually being one, it truly does feel like this culmination of everything Infinite Stratos all packaged into like one bonus disc. Now real quickly, I kind of want to touch on some various things that I might have forgot to mention. One thing I think is notable is that in Infinite Stratos Ignition Hearts, the player character or the main character Ichika isn't actually voiced, and in this game he is, which was something that I was like a little hesitant towards because of, I feel like it was going to maybe take away some of that like perspective of being able to be within the perspective of Ichika and maybe relate more to him. And I actually feel like I want to say that's the opposite after playing Love and Purge, to where I think having him voiced actually made it a little bit more impactful. As well as on that topic of perspective, one thing that Ignition Hearts did quite well was having it to where after common route you split and we're able to then, for a majority of the heroine routes, actually play through the perspective of the heroine herself. And in this game, it obviously doesn't make sense to do that because you are in the perspective of Ichika trying to save each and every single heroine from the storybook that they're trapped in within World Purge. But it is something to where like some of the routes do a little bit of perspective change, but it's a mechanic that was not really used a lot throughout Love and Purge, and I think that kind of hurts a little bit of maybe the originality of the game overall. And then also lastly, a small little detail I want to note is that within Ignition Hearts, it had a very like full connected common route to where you're using all the choices and that dictates as to which heroine route you're going to end up on. This game kind of forgoes that and gets you right into the action. So I want to say you're maybe only going to be in the game for the first like 30-40 minutes as like a prologue in a way, and then you're going to be met with that emergency where all the girls get trapped within World Purge, instead of it having it to where your dialogue choices within the prologue are going to dictate which character you're going to go save. Upon entering the digital world, you're just going to have a menu pop up and you can scroll through all 7 routes, see like a description as to like what storybook it's going to be, and then decide from there who you're going to go ahead and save in whatever order you want to do. So it's something to where it's different enough. It really is like a different feel from the original game, but I don't think that's actually a bad thing. Like I said, I want to say that reading Infinite Stratos, Love and Purge was a fun time, and I got a good amount of time out of it. And overall, if you are a fan of Infinite Stratos, considering that, as far as I know, the story is probably never going to get finished at this point when it comes to the light novels. There's only a limited amount of Infinite Stratos content out there between the anime, the visual novels, and the original source material. And I do think reading Love and Purge, despite the fact that I'm somebody that doesn't know how to read Japanese, was still a very thoroughly enjoyable experience. But yes, those have been my thoughts on Infinite Stratos 2, Love and Purge. Thank you guys for watching. I've been Wave, and I will see you next time.